You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. By going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, you can make this possible. On this show, we also talk about the power of the black athlete, especially in the NBA. Well, we had just saw that this week. When the NCAA announced that they had a new certification process for agents to represent players who leave early. They require a 4-year bachelor's degree. Well, that caused folks like LeBron James to put them on blast. His longtime friend, Rich Paul, who set up his own agency, which is now the dominant sports agency in the NBA, well, he made it perfectly clear this is BS. And then he also wrote about it in a piece online. And what was also interesting is that the NCAA, after they got fierce criticism from folks in media, especially black folks, back down and change that requirement. Joining us right now to talk about this is Justin Tinsley, culture and sports writer for the Undefeated. Justin, glad to have you in Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thank you for having me.
You talk about power, flexing muscle. Rich Paul is arguably the most powerful sports agent in the NBA. And to put the NCAA on blast, saying, why in the hell are you requiring a 4-year bachelor's degree? But he broke down how this could lead to institutional exclusion of black folks. Your thoughts about this power move by Rich Paul forcing the NCAA to back down?
Well, first and foremost, as Rich noted in his column on The Athletic, and I wrote in mine for the Undefeated, this was always going to be about more than just Rich Paul. Because Rich Paul is who he is now. He's best friends with LeBron, and he's an astute businessman. He has some of the top clients in the NBA, whether it be Anthony Davis, Draymond Green, so on and so forth, and of course LeBron being the most prominent. So he's already, in the eyes of some detractors, he's infiltrated the system. This is about providing a stopgap for the next class of Rich Pauls. So that's what that was always about. And if you could just go back through the NCAA's history, I think a lot of people saw this decision as a way to police black mobility within college sports. I don't even have to go into in depth how desegregation impacted HBCU sports. We all know about the pay-for-play debate in sports that has raged on for decades now, and you just look at black graduation rates for black athletes at these Power 5 schools. They're all disproportionately affect black athletes in an actual negative manner. So this was just the next chapter in that story, and I think Rich Paul and LeBron and so many other people saw that for what it was. And by the text of the rule, it was a racially neutral rule, but by implementation, it definitely had racial implications because it just impacted basketball. If it didn't have anything to do with that, it should have been a rule that impacted across the board. Like they didn't influence this rule for college hockey, but it was just for college basketball. So that's how a lot of people saw it.
And that has always been the issue that folks have brought up in terms of how the NCAA and really folks at large, especially a lot of white folks, how we view these issues in sports, because the language around football and basketball is totally different than the language around tennis, around hockey, around baseball, and other sports. You say which two sports? You see mostly African Americans, football and basketball.
Yeah, and absolutely. Those are the revenue generating sports as well when you look at the grand scheme of things. This was a way to police black mobility because now if you can have agents come in and they don't have the bachelor's degrees, they don't come from the big time business schools or graduate programs that a lot of other agents may have come from. If you have unconventional routes into that world, that's going to scare a lot of people. And, Rich Paul, man, when you're young, you're black, you're smart, you're confident, you're going to scare a lot of people, in which he did. Again, this rule was about much more than Rich Paul, but if Rich Paul had to be the one to, at least for 6 days while the rule was actually implemented, fall on that sword, he was the perfect person to do it because once you have power, you have respect as well. And that power and that respect, it blew up in the NCAA's face, and they knew they had to rescind that because there's no way you can keep that rule the way it is. One, because it wasn't going to stop what was already going to happen anyway. These players are playing on AAU teams. They're playing nationally as young as middle school. Like I follow a couple of different accounts on Instagram, and I see middle school players being touted as, oh, this guy is this guy is the top 5 player in the 2024 class. And I'm like, hold on, class of 2024, how old is he at this point? And so these guys these young men are already, these young boys, excuse me, they're already on the national profile from a very young age. So it's not like implementing a rule is going to stop what is already going to happen anyway. And it's not like acting a bachelor's degree is the say-all, end-all, be-all in terms of your competency.
Again, but I want to go back to power.
Mm-hmm.
This is about power and money. What we're talking about, billions of dollars. And what we know is that historically, you have had white agents that have dominated this area. And how did that then transcend? Well, then you had white advisors, white lawyers, white accountants, white business managers, white marketing firms. LeBron James comes along, takes his boys, sends them to get trained. They then take over their own marketing, take over sign other clients. And so really what we're dealing with here, which is why I think the audience needs to understand how this thing sort of just multiplies. What you're seeing are folks who are saying, yo, hold up. These black folks have figured the game out, and they're going to start expanding this thing. We're not going to be able to control the billions of dollars flowing through. We now got to share.
Absolutely. You know, the thing about equality is when you've had the power for so long, for so long, when other people say, like, no, I want a piece of this power too, you start to feel like you're losing your place in society when you're really not. But then you start to react in ways that we just see in all walks of life. With LeBron, like you said, he was a guy at 19 years old. He decided to bring his boys on. He decided to bring his friends on, and they became business partners. Randy Mims, Maverick Carter, and Rich Paul, of course. And a lot of people panned him at the time. If you go back and just read the reports, a lot of people saying LeBron made a stupid mistake. This is going to blow up in his face. Well, nearly 15 years later, we're seeing this now. And LeBron is hands down the most powerful athlete we've ever seen in at least the 4 major sports. It's not even close. And once you have somebody like LeBron, whose influence is what it is, this starts to open eyes. This starts to open imaginations, and to really just be like, hey, look, I'm the one that brings the power to the table, whether that be on the court or off the court. LeBron James, he doesn't need somebody who doesn't really know him or knows what his influences are, what his hopes, what his dreams are, speaking for him if they don't really know who he is. His friends, Randy, Maverick, Rich, they knew that. And I think a lot of young players will see that. And once you start to see that trend, once you start to see that shift, and then once you start to see money going different places, whereas before it wasn't going, that's going to scare a lot of people. And if people can try to halt that process, they'll implement rules like that, which only last for 6 days.
Dr. Cleo Monago, social political analyst, Kelly Bethea, communication strategist, Melik Abdul, vice president, Black Conservative Federation. Cleo, I'll start with you. And there's somebody who's watching who's saying, okay, why you make a big deal out of this? This is just sports. No, this is about the control of the flow of dollars. This is about black folks being in control of our own destiny, Cleo. That's what this is. And the NCAA got blasted because now black people also have platforms, have voices, and can flex this power.
Well, as we spoke about before on other issues, this is a scary time for people who want white power to continue. And NCAA's impulse was, in my opinion, to circumvent the potential for the likes of these brothers to actually stay in their position because they want to keep the power position. As I've spoken about before, in sports, particularly basketball and football, brothers are the lion's share of who are the magicians who make the sport work. At least white men who are concerned about their egos and their power get to run and control everything. And I think that's what prompted the knee-jerk reaction. But it wasn't logical or helpful to keep it going, so they had to rescind. But this is something that's going to be interesting to see what goes forward, because he mentioned the power of LeBron. But there's people who are doing things, even on the presidential level and other kinds of institutional levels, to try to keep white power where it is. So it'd be interesting to see how this pans out over time, because LeBron is changing the game in terms of bringing his friends aboard. But this is not just about power and money generically. In my opinion, this is about white males keeping the historical power they've always had. And they're concerned about there being a shift in that because they want to feel relevant. And when it comes to sports, not unless they're in that powerful position, they are irrelevant proportion to the black men that are involved. So this is very interesting to me.
And the great thing that I actually think about...
Kelly?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, Roland. Yeah, the great thing that I actually think about this, as a huge LeBron James fan, he's doing more than just shutting up and dribbling. He's actually creating a system where people can actually come together, and especially we're talking about black athletes. For LeBron to actually lead this effort, I think that the opportunities from here are endless. When I first heard about this, before they rescinded it, I thought to myself, I was thinking about, it's a little different, but I was thinking about employment law, where this thing is called disparate impact. It's not necessarily, sign out and, documented as far as it being race related, but the impact of that, of course, those of us who are actually felt by those type of racial policies, if you will. So when I heard that they actually rescinded it, I said to myself, LeBron is once again changing the game. And this is what he's done in so many instances. But I think that this is actually giving power to our sports industry across the board. I would love to see something like this continue where they're not just talking about, this is not even a protest. So I'll be interested to see how people respond to it, because this is not a protest. This is about someone like LeBron James using his power to influence the narrative around NCAA and other issues. So I look forward to it, and I think it's a great thing. I honestly think it's a great thing.
Kelly, go ahead.
No, I agree with my panelists here. When Paul mentioned that he didn't know the exact term for such a policy, it really is institutional racism at its finest and in its infancy. Again, this is a niche industry and institution in which it's only applicable to basketball. It didn't even apply to any of the other sports that other black athletes could also be a part of, like tennis, like even football. But they knew that NCAA regarding basketball, there's more black people in that arena and more black people will be affected by this new policy. But it is definitely institutional racism. I'm glad that Rich Paul called it out, and I'm glad that, they rescinded it. I still don't like how they rescinded it in terms of what the new policy is now. Basically, they're saying that, oh, you're okay if the NBA accepts you, et cetera, et cetera. They're still trying to control the narrative and controlling the power. But I think that, this is a start in terms of rescinding the obviously institutional racist policy.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, folks, you've heard me talk a lot about marijuanastock.org. Why? Because I want to keep you informed of investment opportunities that make sense. We've all watched the growth of the cannabis industry. A recent report by New Frontier Data estimates the global cannabis market at more than $340 billion. We know that marijuana legalization is sweeping the country state by state. We also know that marijuana has a good cousin, the hemp plant, with a much higher concentration of CBD. That means hemp gives you all of the medical benefits of marijuana without getting you high. Until recently, hemp farming was practically illegal in the United States and heavily regulated by the DEA. However, the 2018 Farm Bill changed all of that, making it legal to grow hemp CBD in the U.S. and creating one of the largest commodities worldwide. Folks, they need land to grow all of the plants. This is not rocket science. It's real simple. It's an incredible investment opportunity, and that's where our friends at 420 Real Estate come in. Their business model is simple. They buy land that supports hemp CBD grow operations and lease it to licensed, high-paying tenants. That's right, they are hemp CBD landlords, and you can get in on the action. My friends at 420 Real Estate decided to do something special for the Roland Martin Unfiltered fan base. Originally, the minimum investment level was $500. Right now, you can invest in this crowdfunding campaign for as little as $200. That's right, anywhere from $200 up to $10,000. Let me recap. This is a $340 billion industry that is still growing. And you can participate with as little as $200. To invest, go to marijuanastock.org. That's marijuanastock.org. Get in the game and get in the game now. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video.